Hello, friends. This is Dave Hurwitz, executive editor at ClassicsToday.com, here with Mildred, executive cat at ClassicsToday.com. You can see she's working terribly hard, aren't you, honey? Yes, of course. And today we're talking about Rachmaninoff, essential works for beginners, if you're starting your Rachmaninoff collection. Now, Rachmaninoff is a more interesting composer than he gets credit for being. Really, rather more. He was a pianist composer, a great pianist, and really a very serious composer. And he was more a composer than he was a pianist, even though that's how he made his living, and his piano works are what he's most famous for. He had huge hands. I mean, he could reach a twelfth or something like that. He had hands that could go through the whole keyboard there, and he was left-handed on top of it, which make his piano works kind of challenging to play. But as Earl Wild pointed out in his wonderful biography that I talked about a few videos ago, having big hands is actually a disadvantage for pianists. You want to have the right sized hands, because when you have big clodhopper hands, you get crowded. You have to scrunch your fingers together most of the time, because most composers don't write for, huge leaps. They write normal chords for normal hands that are, the keyboard was arranged for normal people with normal hands. And so it's, you have a hard time getting out of your own way if your hands are extremely large, which is also an interesting fact. You might want to know, because everyone talks about how pianists, they just want to have big hands. They need big hands. Well, not necessarily, according to Earl Wild and other major pianists who I've spoken to. But Rachmaninoff wrote for piano and orchestra, which was really an important thing. I mean, his greatest works are for piano and orchestra, his greatest works that have sustained his popularity. And like so many Russian composers, Tchaikovsky being another, he was kind of trashed during the latter half of the 20th century, the middle part of the 20th century, because he was considered to be regressive and romantic and interested in things like tunes and, God forbid, romantic, passion and emotion and, all the things that music wasn't supposed to be doing at the time. And music was supposed to be cold and precise and machine-like when it was tolerable at all. But Rachmaninoff was there. He lived till the 1940s, and he was just cranking out one masterpiece after another, although his output slowed down considerably in his later years. And he didn't live to be that old. He was only in his early 70s, I think, when he passed away. So I have 7 works here that will really get you going, works that consist of Rachmaninoff, some of Rachmaninoff's most popular, some of them, not all of them, and some pieces that I think will expand your knowledge and interest in Rachmaninoff as a composer, as a unique musical voice, as somebody who is worth exploring on your own. So we begin with his most popular ever piece, the Piano Concerto No. 2, which is gorgeous. Absolutely gorgeous. It's the first major piece of music that was dedicated to a hypnotherapist, because Rachmaninoff had a nervous breakdown after the disastrous premiere of his first symphony, which is brilliant, by the way. It's not on this list, but it's something to discover. And he got hypnotized into writing the second piano concerto, which is really in a rather different style than his earlier music. It is more lush, more romantic, darker, part of that romantic Russian gloom that he was famous for. Although his emotional range is actually quite a bit wider than just Russian gloom. I mean, Stravinsky referred to him as a 6-foot scowl, but no, there was more to him than that. And the second piano concerto is absolutely lovely. It became the source of Eric Carmen's song "All by Myself," or whatever that thing was called, or I'll never love this way again, whatever that thing is. That's in the slow movement. And in fact, a lot of Rachmaninoff's slow movements were made into pop songs, as were a lot of Tchaikovsky's. So the Piano Concerto No. 2 is where we start. I am not including Piano Concerto No. 3 to start with, because I think it's actually a rather difficult work. It's a complex work. It's emotionally a little bit more ambivalent, and it's more controversial in terms of how it gets performed, and I'm not going into that now. You can explore that on your own, and you'll have a lovely time doing it. It's a beautiful work, too. Symphony No. 2, that's the next work. Now, the second symphony is his most popular symphony. Like so many of his his works, it was played for many, many years with cuts. The third piano concerto also had cuts, which he authorized. He authorized those cuts. And they were serious cuts. I mean, they really chopped the thing down. The second symphony, if you do the whole thing, never mind repeats and exposition repeats, for example, in the first movement where you play a big chunk of the beginning all over again. Most people don't. Nowadays, people tend to. They tend to take all the repeats to play it exactly as he wrote it. Rachmaninoff's approach as a composer was like his approach as a soloist. He believed that the performer had the right to do what needed to be done. And so when people thought the second symphony was too long, he said, okay, no problem. We'll just take 20 minutes out of it, which is about how much he cut. It's astonishing amount of music. I prefer the complete work because I don't think there's anything wrong with it the way he wrote it. But, a lot of composers felt that in order to facilitate public success and uptake, if it needed to be judiciously or injudiciously trimmed, then that's what they would do, or otherwise altered. And I don't think there's anything wrong with that either. I think today we generally feel that his first thoughts, his original thoughts, are the superior ones, and that the cuts were done for reasons of practicality. And they were. And then we don't have those reasons anymore, so there's no reason to do the cuts. But you can't say that they're wrong because he approved of them. He authorized them. Had some of the very best recordings of the Second Symphony, such as Eugene Ormandy and the Philadelphia Orchestra. Their stereo recording, their first one on Columbia, has those cuts, and it's a great performance. So if you don't have as much time, play it with the cuts. It's lovely. And that slow movement also has a pop song, and I'm never gonna love again, something like that. Yeah. The interesting thing about that tune, however, that movement, is that you only hear it once at the very beginning of the movement. And then after that, Rachmaninoff alludes to it. But it never comes back the way you originally hear it. You only hear it that first time, which is very, very interesting, actually. People don't give him credit for these interesting musical, gambits that he indulges in, where he throws out a tune of just extreme gorgeousness. Of course, there's more beautiful music in that movement, like the clarinet solo that comes immediately afterwards. But after that, he makes you want it to come back. That's the cool thing about it. So there's the Second Symphony. It's absolutely wonderful. Rachmaninoff, by the way, had a characteristic ending for a lot of his works. It's bump ba da dump or bump ba da dump, something like that. One of those composers who had a particular ending that you could always tell it was them. Handel had one, an octave drop, dump bump, like that at the end of a phrase. Haydn had 3 chords, jump, jump, jump. They didn't always end like that, but they had endings that were very, very characteristic. Sibelius had an amen ending that he used all over the place. Very, very interesting. And so Rachmaninoff was one of those who had real personality. And that's what you see the Romantic composers had. They had character, they had personality, they had proprietary methods of doing things. And so you can tell who they are because of their special voice. That's what makes the music appealing to us today. And that's what made them great composers. It wasn't their handling of form or their mastery of counterpoint, though of course they had that too. They had mastery in other areas, orchestration for sure. But it was using those things to capture a completely personal mood or means of expression. And that's why, something that all those modern composers who all sound like each other, they're just jealous, absolutely jealous. So after Symphony No. 2, we have to do some solo piano music. Rachmaninoff's solo piano music, interestingly enough, is not as popular as his music with orchestra. And I'm not really surprised at that because it's very intricate and difficult for pianists to play. And it's easy for it to sound muddy, for it to sound, overly notey. So I would start with the Rachmaninoff piano music with his preludes for piano. There are 24 of them, actually, roughly, one in each major and minor key, but he didn't actually assemble them that way originally. They sort of evolved that way. The most famous is in his Opus 3, which has several other pieces in it, including the Prelude in C sharp minor, which Rachmaninoff grew to hate. He called it Frankenstein prelude because people played it constantly. I even played it, believe it or not. It's a great piece. It's so much fun. And then after that, there are two more sets, which I indicate in the list below, that you can get that have something like, 10 and 13 or something like that, or some number of preludes. And they're just beautiful. They're beautiful character works, not too long, and tons of fun. So that's where you should start with his piano music. There's about 7 discs of music, CDs worth. That's how I think in terms of CDs, although nowadays with streaming, that's probably foolish. But that's the way I used to think of it. So they're about like 7 or 8 CDs of piano music. And the preludes will occupy 2 of them, probably, or for the most part. And they're gorgeous, absolutely gorgeous. After the preludes, the Symphonic Dances. This is his last major work. And it is a knockout, and it's amazing. Until a few decades ago, it was all but unknown. It never got performed. People didn't talk about it. Rachmaninoff was quite pleased with it. He thought, he said he thought he'd fired off his last shot and was surprised at how well it turned out. It's a masterpiece. It's practically a symphony in 3 big movements. And it uses, like so much of his music, the Dies Irae tune. Da 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 da. That's in the Berlioz Symphonie Fantastique and millions of other pieces. It's a Gregorian chant. The words are the Day of Judgment. Dies Irae, Day of Anger, Day of Wrath. The whole universe is going to pieces. All that stuff. And wow, what a knockout of a piece it really is. I've played it a couple times. It is so much fun, and it's so beautiful, and it's quite different from that sort of languorous, romantic, slush fest, for want of a better term, that you hear in like the Second Piano Concerto and the Second Symphony. It's harder edged. It's just as tuneful. I mean, the tunes are just great in this piece, but it has more bite and a stronger and more powerful sense of rhythm, and that's the reason I love it so much. It's really phenomenal. So after the Symphonic Dances, more piano music. If you like the preludes, the next thing to go on to are the Études-Tableaux, which means basically study pictures. Study pictures, they are piano etudes in that they deal with specific elements of piano technique, but they are also illustrative. They are pictures of things. And Rachmaninoff was not interested particularly in telling us what the pictures are. He did authorize the composer Respighi to orchestrate a few of them, and he mentioned to Respighi what some of the ideas were. And so if you want to get Respighi's orchestration of the Rachmaninoff Études-Tableaux, you'll get some insight into what he might have been thinking about in the piano originals. These are slightly larger than the preludes, and of a more sort of fantastical and imaginative cast, because they are, after all, program music. They are about illustrating scenes or imaginary scenes in the composer's mind, because Rachmaninoff had an extraordinary musical imagination. He really did. Again, he doesn't get credit for these things, for his visionary aspect. And it's a shame, because it's there, and you can hear it in these pieces, which are wonderfully hypnotically evocative and powerful and full of all kinds of moods. Really a whole little world in these tiny little pieces that's just remarkable. So after the Études-Tableaux, we do his Rhapsody on a Theme of Paganini, possibly the greatest piece of music ever written in variation form for piano and orchestra. It is unbelievable. The tune is the one that everybody uses from Paganini. It's the last of his 24 violin caprices. Dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum ba da 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 dum bum bum ba da 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 dum. That one. That's the tune. And the 18th variation in this piece is the famous one, because what Rachmaninoff does is he inverts it. That is, he plays it upside down, slows it down, reharmonizes it, and creates one of the most voluptuous and gorgeous romantic tunes in the history of humanity. It's unbelievable, but the piece is actually in the same vein. It's a late work as the Symphonic Dances. That is, it has the rhythm, it has the edge, it has the brilliance, in addition to the gorgeous melodies, and it has the Dies Irae, Da, 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 da. It actually ends with that. And Rachmaninoff, of course, was not known for his sense of humor, but the end of this piece is funny. It's one of his genuinely humorous moments. And you have to hear it for yourself to figure out just how humorous it is. But it's delightful and clever and witty and about 25 minutes long. It's as long as a concerto. And it's just one of the most remarkable masterpieces ever written for piano and orchestra. However, there is one more work that you absolutely have to hear, which is astonishing. And it's The Bells, a cantata, a symphony cantata. It's a 4-movement symphony it's a choral symphony for voices and orchestra. And, Rachmaninoff, again, he's not known so much as a composer for voices, with one exception, his sacred work, The Vespers, which is based on Russian Orthodox chant, which is also something worth discovering once you get to know his musical style, because it's a remarkable piece too. But The Bells is based on the poem by Edgar Allan Poe, right? Remember? Hear the loud alarum bells, brazen bells. What a tale of terror now their turbulence he tells. In this startled ear of night, how they scream out their affright. Too much terrified to speak, they can only shriek, shriek, shriek. The bells, 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 bells. Anyway, he took a Russian translation of that, and he turned it into a 4-movement symphony, and each movement represents a different kind of bells. It begins with like wedding bells, and then there's, is it wedding bells or spring bells or some kind of bells, happy bells, and then wedding bells, and then the alarm bells, and then the funeral bells at the end, because it's Russian. But it actually ends in transfigured peace. It's not performed very often. It's a difficult work to do. It's not terribly long. It's like 35, 40 minutes, but it requires a huge orchestra plus a chorus and 3 soloists and an organ, and it's a little bit of it takes a little bit of work and a little bit of practice and a little bit of rehearsals and a chorus that can sing in Russian. And, I've only seen it performed live once. I would wish it were more frequently done. It is arguably Rachmaninoff's masterpiece. I mean, he also wrote 3 operas, 1-act operas, but he wrote 3 of them, and a wonderful selection of songs. He was a master songwriter, and the great pianist Earl Wild transcribed a lot of those songs for piano solo. They made them quite popular in piano circles. So there's more to Rachmaninoff, like I said, than at first meets the eye, and The Bells will, I think, point you in that direction. It's an extraordinary work and brilliant and fun to listen to. And so with those 7 pieces, if you have them, and if you let them sink in, then you will, I think, have all you need to follow your Rachmaninoff investigations on your own and get the most out of them. Because it's all just about listening, friends. You don't need any prior knowledge or special training. Even Mildred here, right, honey? Yes, you know as well as anybody. She has no problem with this stuff. None whatsoever. Nobody does. You just have to listen to it. So do that. Keep on listening, friends. Thank you for joining me. Take care.